remarks that gave us the overall sort of situation, the context where we are living, and the importance of you know, joining hands and working together, understanding the dimensions of this crisis, and also understanding how much, especially within the UN system, agencies can sort of help each other to support member states in addressing this universal challenge. We have a very distinguished panel with us from a variety of organizations that we felt can bring in their perspectives. In the last few months, we noticed in the UN system in particular that there is a flow of exchanges amongst the agencies or between agencies and member states and other institutions. There's a flow of a lot of useful thoughts, ideas that is happening, and we felt it would be a sort of pity and a disadvantage if we would not take a stock of all these and bring them together, not only to understand the latest status of each agency's response to this challenge, but also try to understand the interlinkages and how can we help each other and help member states in a joint manner. And I hope that this discussion today would help us to understand the latest sort of developments in each sort of aspects of this challenge, and also understanding implications to each sector and the opportunities that agencies have explored in responding, and also in finding opportunities for collaboration with each other in the future. We have a distinguished panel. We have a distinguished moderator who has talked and written a lot, not only about the COVID, but also about the system complexities when it comes to addressing interlinkages and interlinked challenges. Kaveh has been with us in the past, also with the past Nexus Dialogues from the Imperial College, now with the Yale University. He will introduce himself better. We are very much pleased to have him, and also the other panelists from different agencies in the UN and also outside. This particular dialogue is going to focus on pollution and waste, but we thought of really send a message that by pollution, we are not limiting our discussion only to a physical pollution as it has been known in terms of waste, but also other types of pollution that we are underestimating perhaps at the moment, because there is little research and findings around it, such as the pollution in water or in land, etc. So let us hope that this conversation will allow us to open our perspectives and identify opportunities for collaboration. With that, I would like to pass it to our dear moderator, Kaveh. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Hussein. Thank you, Nina, for all your efforts. Thank you, Sathia, for your opening remarks. It's great to see the United Nations system active despite all the limitations. Physical distancing has not stopped us from working and interacting with each other. When it comes to the discussions about COVID-19, we hear a lot about the impacts on economy, on health, of course, and then more recently on food. When it comes to the environment, the common belief of the public is that COVID-19 has been a gift to the environment. Most of the problems are still masked, and we don't know much about them. The impacts are yet to come and be discovered. Like any crisis, this can be an opportunity to do things better as we proceed, but it can also create a lot of challenges. So it is really good to be proactively detect such challenges and take actions on them, be prepared, and warn the world about what we might expect and how we can enable the future. If you want a future to be different from what we have experienced in the past. So we are having a series of discussions on COVID-19 and the environment, as the three discussions among the Nexus Dialogue series that UNEMG has been organizing successfully. This hopefully will make the network of collaborators stronger. We can pool the resources and efforts and do a better job. I'm here to help. Kaveh Madani from Yale University, trying to moderate a session here. My job is just to watch the time and entertain you. I welcome all the attendees. We have seen a great number of people joining us. For those who might have poor connections, the good news is that we will be recording the session and the video will be online. Later I'll also tell you which platform, but it will definitely be on the UNEMG website, and you can watch it online if you can stay online for the whole session or if you have connection problems. So we have a esteemed group of panelists, and I think it's I do justice if I ask them to introduce themselves, and just so you know that how international we are. You know, you'll hear that they're joining from different parts of the world. The same for our attendees. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, depending on where you have joined. I now want to ask our panelists to introduce themselves. María.
Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. My name is María Cristina Cardenas. I'm a senior policy and strategy advisor in the Secretariat for the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, which are 3 conventions that deal with chemicals and wastes. So it's very nice to be here with you. Thank you. And I'm connecting from Geneva. I don't know if I mentioned that.
Thank you. Great to have you today. Jacqueline?
We are missing Jacqueline, I think, for now.
We're missing Jacqueline, yes.
Hoping that she joins. Swati?
Hi everyone, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. This is Swati. I'm joining from New Delhi. I work with UN Habitat as a waste management specialist, and I've worked widely on policy and implementation on decentralized waste management across India and Global South. Thank you.
Great to have you with us today. Mushtaq.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to even myself. I'm from Bangkok, where it's taking almost 7:15. So I'm regional coordinator for resource efficiency for Asia Pacific for the United Nations Environment Program. But in addition to that, as Satya mentioned, that United Nations Environment Program has launched the response for COVID-19. That's to working with the environment to protect people. And under that, the first response is focusing on waste, and I'm coordinating that global effort from UNEP side for waste management. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to have you with us today. Ute?
Hello, everybody from Berlin, Germany. I'm pleased to be part of the team of the WASH unit at WHO headquarters in Geneva. And I'm a healthcare waste management expert working in this area since almost 20 years now worldwide. And I'm happy to be here and happy that you've joined. Thank you.
Thanks, and great to have you with us. And last but not least, María.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Jales, and I'm an Economic Affairs Officer at UNCTAD. That's the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And my connection with pollution and waste is specific to the trade-related aspects of plastics, more specifically. And we also carry out some work on the circular economy. So within UNCTAD, I work in the branch on trade, environment, climate change, and sustainable development.
Thank you. Great to have you with us. For the participants, I should explain how we will proceed. I will start with asking questions from the esteemed panelists, and they will provide short answers to my questions. We will learn about what they are doing within their agencies and what challenges we are facing and how the future might look like. We will be having a Q&A at the end of the session. So please ask your questions through the platform, and I'll look at them and ask a few questions from the panelists at the end, depending on how much time we will have. So let's start. You know, you all are dealing with waste as we discussed, as you explained, different aspects within different agencies, and of course there are interconnections and parallel things happening. We just want to know what is happening around the world within the agencies. So can you tell us what have been your agency's recent science policy discussions been, and how they're addressing the pollution and waste topic? Let's start with María.
Thank you. At the PRS Secretariat, we have been very committed as we realize that despite the immense challenges that the world is facing currently with the pandemic, it is indeed an opportunity for everyone, including our parties, of course, to build back better. The Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions provide together a framework for the life management of chemicals and waste with a common objective to protect human health and the environment. And they count nowadays with almost universal participation. Last year, our 3 conventions were amended in different manners. The Stockholm and the Rotterdam Conventions had 2 chemicals included in their lists, while the Basel Convention amended its annex to include plastic waste. This means that the scope of plastic under the convention was clarified, and now plastic is subject to prior informed procedures. This has become the first and only legally binding, globally reaching mechanism for managing plastic. So we've been devoting a lot of our attention and time working in putting in place all the measures that are required for the plastic amendment to become effective. It will actually become effective for all parties on the 1st of January 2021, so very soon. But in addition of adding or amending the convention, the other issue that has happened was that there was a plastic waste partnership established under the Basel Convention. And the goal of this plastic waste partnership has been to improve and promote the environmentally sound management of waste, and plastic waste in particular, at the global, regional, and national levels, to prevent and minimize the generation of plastics. The first meeting of the plastic waste partnership took place just before the lockdown in March in the Seychelles. So the work is already ongoing. The partnership has already mobilized businesses, governments, academia, and civil society, and they're starting to work on guidance for parties and others. In addition, we also have the household waste partnership that is working in developing guidance documents for the sound management of household waste. And this is particularly important now with COVID-19, because we do have an issue that help parties handle their domestic waste.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So as you hear, and I think our participants are also very much aware of this, and the general public and those interested in the environmental topic. PPEs have, the production of PPEs have been on the rise for a long time. We were putting nature, in our plastic, and now nature is throwing the plastics back at us, but we will dispose them, unfortunately, and yet we don't know what is going to happen. Masks are, use of the masks is on the rise. We know right now we have about 40% of our production dedicated to production of medical masks. So 89 million masks have been estimated to be needed per month for dealing with this pandemic. And as long as we don't have the cure for it, and as long as we want to open the public spaces and have people live normally, whether they can or not, we have to rely on masks. So we don't have the, yet the culture instructions and things that must come with the use of masks and PPEs, and a lot of work needs to be done in that space. Next, I want to ask the same question from Jacqueline, what your agency has been doing in this space.
Jacqueline is not online.
Yet online. We'll go to Swati. Swati?
Sorry. Yes. UN Habitat India is working with the Central Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, along with 5 pilot intervention cities to infuse sustainability strategies into urban planning and management at city level, which means looking into enabling climate for investments in green infrastructure that would reduce J&J emissions, improving service delivery, which includes waste and sanitation and other basic urban services, and also overall enhancing the quality of living for citizens and thereby building resilience and strengthening governance capacity of the cities. We are presently supporting and handholding municipalities, 5 pilot cities in the country, to strengthen basic urban services, as well as linking them to our operations with the headquarters in Nairobi, as well as the regional office for Asia and Pacific, to encourage cross-learnings and learn various best practice interventions, which becomes even more important in the times of the pandemic, because there is a current issue with the surge in plastics, or what to do with growing quantums of domestic hazardous waste, which are the most pressing issues that are arising from various municipalities on the ground. So addressing it and finding various interventions for it, and also trying to bring in various local as well as regional and global practices to them is what basically we are focusing on in the sphere of pollution and waste. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mushtaq, what have you been doing at the Asia Pacific office of the UNEP?
Okay, before getting there, waste, when this word comes to mind, like there was a famous publication, water waste, or like our parents used to tell, don't waste. So what does it really mean by waste? Waste means, when we look from the environmental perspective as a UNEP, that has a relevance that nature, we are wasting our natural resources if we create a waste, or we rather contaminate also the natural resources when we put waste back into the nature. Climate change, there's a lot of linkages from the greenhouse gases out of the waste and also the wasted materials in circular economy. And then also pollution-free planet when we talk about that. So when UNEP is now focusing on the 3 planetary crises, one is a pollution, one is a climate, one is a nature and biodiversity, waste cuts across. And that's where the UNEP is bringing the policy and science interface through big data, science assessments, and also supporting the multilateral environmental agreements, including Basel Convention and so on. And with the enablers like digital technologies or digitization, again, big data or sustainable finance and so on. So for this COVID, for example, as the first response, on the waste management, especially when we look on the 2 major streams which are coming out, one is obviously the medical waste, and other one is packaging and plastics waste because of the lockdowns and all this PPEs, masks, and so on. So again, when you look on that, how you are going to address, so UNEP gets again from those angles like a science, that how much waste is being generated. So we start upstream, like how many masks, as you put the number that so many masks are required for that. So how many masks are being produced? How many masks are getting to the consumers? What are the leakages in between or discarded masks and so on? How much consumers' rate of use, whether they are using the washable, reusable mask or whether they are using the medical mask, and again, how they are disposing of. What is the collection systems, disposal systems in the cities? whether they are ending up in the marine environment, as we have seen, and then what policies, what financing incentives, disincentives, what technologies, what business models, and what behavioral changes are required. So that's our work. That's UNEP is putting to help this 3 planetary crises, which are linked across through the waste management. So as I would mention that I'm also the regional coordinator for resource efficiency. So for example, circular economy is at the core, or we like SDG 12, which UNEP is the leading on that goal. So SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. So basically this is a direct linkages for the zero waste, that we can close the circles as local as possible without getting to the transboundary challenges and so on. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Mushtaq. Let's now go to Ute. You're working with the WHO, so tell us what is happening there.
Yeah, thank you. Of course, WHO is very active at the moment in fighting COVID-19 problems as well in the wash area and waste area. In May, for example, this year, the World Health Assembly on WASH took place, at which WHO called on world leaders to ensure urgent investments in hygiene and sanitation, including waste management, as it is central to COVID-19 response and rebuilding strategies. Actually, WHO is publishing an interim guidance, which is frequently revised on WASH in COVID-19 times. And this is providing really very specific information on all the different water, sanitation, hygiene, and waste management chapters in this area. So this means that we really want the countries to reinforce their healthcare waste management procedures, like the correct segregation of infectious waste and general waste, not to stop segregation, not to put everything into one bin and declare it as infectious waste, just to reinforce the standard procedures which should have been established anyway, or to reinforce them. What is also important, that WHO is calling all stakeholders to uphold the Stockholm Conventions on POPs. So the preferred usage of alternative treatment technologies like autoclaving or high temperature incineration wherever possible. A lot of countries are actually coming up with, okay, now we have a problem, we have more waste, we need treatment technology. Please provide us incinerators, for example. A lot of cases, it is very important to assess the situation. So this is what WHO is always calling for. So what are the available capacities in the countries? So can we just take these capacities and increase them by burning, for example, waste more than five days a week, but 7 days a week, or to use the equipment with 2 shifts of people and so on. Furthermore, there is a specific guideline which has been developed in 2019 on the treatment of infectious and sharp waste, which is also providing information how to choose the correct or best treatment technology for the specific situation. So these are just some specifics which have been done just recently. There are a lot of more things going on here, but I just want to keep it clear and simple at the beginning. So thank you very much.
Thank you. María, can you enlighten us?
Okay, sure. So UNCTAD has 3 main lines of work or streams of work that deals with pollution and waste. So I will address each one of them separately. So the first one has to do with supporting member states on emerging cooperation initiatives in the area of trade multilaterally. So most recently, for example, UNCTAD submitted a communication to the Committee on Trade and Environment of the WTO. So this meeting occurs periodically here in Geneva. This committee addressed the interlinkages between trade and environment within the multilateral trading system. this action by UNCTAD was actually motivated by member states. So a lot of our action on plastics and pollution and waste is actually motivated by the interest of our member states, especially developing countries. So recently we've become more active. We've submitted this communication, which is still a restricted document, so it hasn't been shared publicly, but there is a second document, which is the statement that was made by our director, and that document is available at the, among the background documents for our meeting today. So you can check this statement made by our director in that meeting. That's our first line of work. It's promoting consensus building or promoting cooperation by member states when they're dealing with plastics, waste, and trade. So specifically, our focus tends to be on trade and development. A second line of work is that UNCTAD works as a strategic partner to the Department for International Development of the United Kingdom in a particular project called the Sustainable Manufacturing and Environmental Pollution Program. And one of the main goals of this program is to develop solutions to plastic problems. And two particular problems have, or solutions, let's say, have been identified. One of them is to support the identification and development of materials or material substitution. And the second one is to enhance biodegradable options. So this program will be issuing calls for proposals, and institutions will be able to apply for funding to carry out research into finding solutions to these problems. That was our second line of work. Our third line of work is called the Oceans Forum, and it's actually a multi-party initiative that UNCTAD plays a major role in this initiative. And this Oceans Forum is particularly focused on the trade-related aspects of SDG 14, i.e. the life below water SDG. So there have been two meetings already, or let's say conferences that happened before COVID. Since COVID, there was one particular online conference that took place on June 4th. And this online conference, it was called Blue Economy and COVID-19 Pandemic, New Challenges, Recovery Measures, and Resilience. And we act together with several other UN agency families, including the FAO, UNITAR, and also non-UN agencies like the International Oceans Institute. So among these three actions, so the consensus building, the program with the British government, and the third one is the Ocean Forums as part of a UN initiative to address the blue economy, we have been looking at plastics. And the degree or the importance of plastics varies across our initiatives. I can say, for example, that for the Oceans Forum, traditionally more attention was given to, let's say, fisheries or tourism, coastal tourism, and so on. But now with COVID, the plastic pollution part of the oceans economy has become more apparent and even increasingly more relevant.
Thank you. All the interesting background noises. I have planes going above me, and now you have ambulance next to you. So the life is going on around the world. So thank you all. I mean, we're doing well with the time. I thank the panelists for keeping the answers short. I know they have a lot to say, but it's great. For the participants, I should say it one more time. I think you get it in writing as well, that you can ask questions through the Q&A function. If it is manageable, the questions would be answered by our panelists through text or online live later on, if depending on how much time we have. So feel free to ask questions. So now you come from different countries. Some of you have worked with governments in your country of origin. You still have connections, of course. You're dealing and interacting with governments around the world. What do you think that, what are the key capacities and service provisions at the national and global level that need to be strengthened to deal with the upcoming challenges or ongoing challenges with waste and pollution as it relates to the COVID-19 crisis? Maria.
Thank you very much. Yes, in terms of the challenges that the key capacities and services that need to be strengthened, one of it for us under the Basel Convention, and this has been already highlighted by our parties when we've undertaken a needs assessment, and it continues still valid, is the need to strengthen the national capacity, institutional national capacity. And this is a very simple one that one would assume not be so relevant, but it's probably the most important one. And that is of strengthening, for instance, national coordination capacities. And the need to ensure that there is a proper communication amongst the different agencies to be able to implement obligations under our conventions, but at the same time to deal with the issue of waste in general and also with chemicals management. So for the current pandemic, it is still very clear that that is one of the issues where it is important that we focus, and that's where we are trying to work to assist our parties. And we're trying to assist them also working with the regional centers. The Basel and the Stockholm Conventions have regional centers that provide capacity and assistance to at the national level. And they're working together with some of the other agencies.
Thank you, Maria. Let's go to Swati.
I think adding on to Maria's, maybe I would like to bring in some numbers. If we look at it, by 2050, 2/3 of us will live in cities. However, our urban centers are contending with the effect of our existing take, make, waste economy. And under this present linear system, cities consume over 75% of natural resources. They produce over 50% of global waste and emit between 60 to 80% of greenhouse gases. So of course, there is an urgent need across the globe to adopt for circular strategies, and wherever it's not happening, to replicate them. At national level, if we talk about the Indian scenario, definitely we need more circular perspectives in practice. And if you look at the reforms that we would need, first is of course creating systems so that there is effective behavior change when it comes to waste, for instance. Source segregation is the need of the hour, and all across developing economies where segregation of waste is not happening. That's actually the biggest challenge to deal with. So of course, social engineering component needs to be looked into. Secondly, we need to make investments in circular economy, make resource efficiency more financially viable so that we could push more and more industries that would, invest into more circular strategies as well as technologies, and for which we would need a industry specific roadmap, because as the country is planning to mobilize more on industrialization and development, of course, circularity is the key, and some of the industries that could be looked into could be transportation, food and agricultural, metal and minerals, electronics, municipal solid waste, textiles, automobile industry, etc. Definitely to take it forward, we would need a policy roadmap and coordination, which is very much under the draft stages, but not just its replication at the central level, but also at the state government level, as well as at the city, as well as the local level. How do we address informalities is another big challenge when I talk about the developing context for India, for that matter, the informal sector, and how do around all these developments we integrate them is another task that I feel we should be looking at. Strengthening and capacitating municipalities, of course, so that all the interventions that happen on the ground, especially when we talk about urban services, they are looked into. Waste, sanitation, even plastic waste management for that matter is a major part of it. And holistically looking at not just effective waste management and sanitation, but also urban mobility, green infrastructure development, building inclusive cities, all these factors has to be given additional weightage to. And of course, linking it with the global scenario, because, of course, we have to work on a lot of things, but also replicating best practices, I feel in times today, is the need of the hour, to learn what is good and to not repeat the same mistakes that have maybe happened. So I think encouraging cross learnings to replicate all this is extremely pertinent. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go more toward the east and ask Mushtaq. What key capacities and service provisions do you think that we must strengthen at the national and global level?
Okay, UNEP for at least since '92 Rio WSST have been supporting national, even the city level and the regional and global like capacities. So we have supported quite many countries with the national waste management strategies, many cities with the city level waste management strategies across all the waste streams. Like we coined the word integrated solid waste management. That is basically brings all the like municipal waste, e-waste, industrial waste, depending on whether you talk from the geographical point of view or administrative point of view, that how you integrate that one. So coming there also then global waste management outlook and regional waste management outlooks, and also the capacity wise like working with the universities on the master's programs on that for the long-term capacities. But now let me put in the more systematic way that we do that basically for the sake of science policy interface. So looking at the policies, the regulatory frameworks, and also UNEP came up with the guidelines on the regulatory frameworks, because if you look on the waste management regulations, they are cutting across different sectors, water sector, air quality sector, even greenhouse gases sector, and so on. So, and also different, like many countries are parties to the different MEAs. And so again, under those MEAs obligations like Basel, they have to like have regulatory frameworks. So how the countries can put all together to see what does it mean when you talk about the regulatory framework for the waste management. Again, looking from the upstream, from the eco designs and so on. So UNEP works a lot on the life cycle assessments also to help them to understand the processes so the policies can really address towards zero waste or circular economy, or in the broader sense, the green economy models. Then after policies comes institutional arrangements. If you look on the many countries, there were very different institutional arrangements for waste management, for municipal waste, for e-waste, healthcare waste, as well as from the national and the local, like a Ministry of Environment may not necessarily be responsible for the waste management. They may be just a guidelines. So Ministry of Interior in some countries, because they control the municipalities, they may be responsible, and so on. So you look across that institutional arrangement. Third comes the financing. As waste is a very expensive business. Waste collection, like all the budgets are gone only in the collection, and still the collection is not done. So how you really create the finance? On the one hand, you reduce your costs, you reduce the waste. On the other hand, you come up with a waste, converting waste into a resource pack. So at least you can have some subsidies and so on, cross subsidies. And then you're looking on the polluter pay principles, extended producer responsibilities, and so on to really create this financing or sustainable financing mechanisms for waste management per se. Then coming the technologies. As we see, the biodegradable waste, plastics, hazardous waste, and so on. So that requires a different set of the technologies, and some technologies with economies of scale may not be possible for the, like, let's say small islands. How you like work with the Basel Convention for transboundary to really help them to cut across those technologies across the smaller like island states and so on. Then comes the business models. Like we see some places, some like municipal waste is a municipal service, but in other places is the private sector is involved there, for example, under different models like a BOT, franchise, and so on. So again, which model works well, depending on the local capacities, even the legal systems and so on. But last, which is the most important, is the behaviors. Whether we talk about the downstream, like a segregation, at properly reuse and recycling and so on, or we look on the upstream, like bringing the recycling back into the systems, that how the people accept those recyclable goods or produced from the recyclable materials, the eco designs and so on. So the behaviors really play the very important role on that. So these are the national and city capacities. But when you talk about the regional, and so like ASEAN, for example, or APEC, or I was supporting WTO on this free trade agreement for the environmental goods and services, so the waste technologies. Now, waste management technologies, most of technologies are same for the commercial use, whether it be the landfill equipment, whether it be the collection trucks, how you really get that to be subsidized by the government as the environmental services technologies and so on. So you have to work very closely with UNCTAD, with the WTO, with the countries like ASEAN in the sub-region, or APEC and so on. So I think that's there. And on the global, as we are here sitting, I think it's very important to learn from each other. Cross-fertilization is very important rather than reinventing the wheel again and again. So that's where we are here. Thank you. Over to you.
If we learn not to reinvent the wheel and not to reproduce the mistakes that others have during different stages of development, unfortunately, the nature of humans, I don't know, calls for repeating mistakes. Ute.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think financing is a very, very important aspect here. And of course, we can lower costs for waste management with a lot of activities, like I said, segregation and so on. However, waste management is costly at the end. And this needs to be considered. And it's not just enough to invest in waste management, but everybody needs to choose to ensure that also the operation cost, maintenance and repair can be paid by the countries. And this is at the moment in a lot of countries not the case. There are a lot of reasons for that, and one of the reasons is that waste management is just not a priority for a lot of countries. And this is then fighting back and in such crisis like it is now. So waste management is definitely an area which needs to be tackled and strengthened. And to strengthen WASH in the countries, WHO worked together with UNICEF on a global guidance on the practical steps that need to be taken to the weak WASH situation in the countries to solve the crisis. These steps include the development of national roadmaps, not just go ahead and just purchase things or but really plan on national level how you want to solve the problem on the long run. Then setting targets and regularly monitoring. Monitoring needs to be enforced. So in a lot of countries also there are legal regulations, also monitoring schemes, but they are just not enforced. So legal regulations are good, but they need to be enforced. So this needs to be strengthened in a lot of countries as well. Also improving infrastructure and maintenance and developing the health workforce and engaging communities, which is also very important and often forgotten. It's important to strengthen the WASH and healthcare facilities on all levels, including the primary services. WHO together with UNICEF has developed a WASH Fit tool to assess and improve the situation on site. Training is provided in many countries, also ongoing, also virtual now, and to strengthen the national systems. This tool has been adapted to the COVID-19 situation. So also a lot of webinars have been conducted by WHO, providing guidance to countries, answering questions and questions, and trying to enhance the awareness and capacities in the countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see that we are getting some questions. That's good to know that our audience is there and enjoying the discussions and asking questions. And I ask the panelists to please respond to these questions if they can. We hear a lot about masks and plastic and PPEs and things like that, but not much about other sorts of waste. I can see from the questions that wastewater is a concern for people in some countries. Now, what to do, what the culture is, as the panelists mentioned, what are the instructions on how to deal with the new types of I would say solid waste that people don't know what to deal with, how to deal with them. Shall they consider them as plastic and recyclable material, or are they dealing with hazardous waste? There are also other sorts of increasing footprints, like that. Now that we are talking through the internet, there's increased data use around the world, and actually some self-promotion here. We are doing calculations of the footprint and energy footprint and water footprint and land footprint of increased internet use around the world, and that is crazy. The numbers are striking. Now I go to María.
Thank you. So we are addressing capacities that should be strengthened. So my answer will be, we'll have two parts. The first one is related to what can be done at the national level. Many things can be done, but the one that's the most pressing one, like I think all of my predecessors, they've mentioned waste management. And here, like Swati, I think it's important to have some numbers as guiding parameters. So in terms of plastics, which is the type of waste that we've been focusing on, it's very important to know, based on a study conducted by UN Environment, that 93% of all macroplastics that are leaked into the global oceans or water bodies, they come from developing countries. So we need really to make that number very clear. 93% of all macroplastics comes from developing countries. So the solid waste management issue is a global issue, but it's especially an issue for the least developed countries and for the developing countries in general. So these countries have a lot to learn from developed countries that have well-developed systems, and there's space for technology transfer and the financial support from more advanced economies. And like it was just mentioned, solid waste management is not the only problem. We also have the wastewater treatment coverage that's very low. And this also has a direct impact on the plastics issue, because it's through the water that we get the microplastic problem. And again, developing countries are the main source for microplastic pollution, according to this one study by UNEP, at 62%. So it's not as high as 93% for macroplastic pollution, but 62% of microplastic pollution would also be originated from developing countries. So my role here is at no way to blame developing countries, but just to recognize that special attention needs to be given to reflect these figures. So this happens at the national level. At the global level, for all countries, what are the areas in which very important action can take place? The circular economy is one of the ways that we can approach this question. This was already mentioned by Swati as well. So and also by Mushtaq as well. So traditionally we think about technology, about recycling. That's one of the aspects of the circular economy. It's not the only one, but maybe it's the one that gets the most press coverage. So for recycling, it's very important again that we have technology transfer, because historically we've seen a lot of waste, plastic waste, going to developing countries, supposedly to be recycled, and a lot of that was never recycled. A lot of that was landfilled, or a lot of that just escaped into the oceans. So if developed countries are really concerned about promoting a circular economy, they should also be concerned about ensuring that the plastic waste that they export is actually recycled, that it doesn't end up contaminating our oceans. So for the recycling part, not only developing countries need to invest in it, developed countries also were woken up, let's say, by the Chinese recent more stringent rules on trade in plastic waste, that they were unable to take care of all the amount of plastic waste that they were producing. So there needs to be a concerted effort at the national and global level to promote this global circular economy that involves plastic. The other sides of the circular economy beyond recycling also need to be strengthened. The reuse, which was already mentioned, but also product design and product substitute, just like material substitution. So companies should be investing more on designing products that use less plastics and use substitutes that are more sustainable, I'd say. So it's important to remember these other sides of the circular economy. So in summary, I think that we must focus on waste management, solid solid waste management, but also wastewater, with a special attention in recognition that the problem is very big in developing countries. At the global level, we should be encouraging a global circular economy and making sure that we are not exporting pollution, and that we are focusing not only on recycling, but also reuse and redesigning of products. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Well, you know, it's good to emphasize that circular economy is beyond recycling. It's just not a rephrasing, you know, another term for recycling. It's much beyond that. And yeah, we have to learn a lot and invent a lot when it comes to circular economy, but there are tons of opportunities. Just to add to your point, you know, when we talk about these numbers, we are not blaming the developing world for, you know, or when we say there are opportunities for learning from the developed world or advanced economies, this is also not to blame a particular side of the world. We also know that the reason that we see increased pollution in some places, or the reason that you know, certain types of pollutions are more dominant or significant in parts of the world, is because they bear the cost of production. These countries and nations are the ones which do a lot of production, and unfortunately have to bear the cost, and it's part of the environmental injustice problem that we still have a lot to do about. Let's go to the next question. You touched, you kind of covered this in your previous answers, but this is another opportunity to emphasize on the capacity gaps and challenges. What are the challenges and what are the capacity gaps? Think about the intergovernmental agencies, different organizations dealing with waste and pollution, and also what the governments are going through. Especially, you know, if economies are going down, if there is pressure on economy, waste might be forgotten, and you know, what can we do about it? Maria, you're muted.
Sorry, I couldn't hear if you were giving me the floor or not. Thank you very much. And I was just thinking as I listened to all the other panelists, and one of the key points that I took was this issue of not reinventing the wheel. And I think that this is something where, you know, it's one of those challenges. We always try to reinvent the wheel when we could just go back and see, well, we have the wheel, what else can we do with it to improve things? We tend to have a very short-term memory of what we have done. And we are seeing it right now with the pandemic. You know, people forget that there are lots of measures already in place that they can use. There's a lot of guidance available that can be used. So one of the things that we need to do is ensure that there is enough communication and that we remind our colleagues and others that there are measures that they can put easily in place, and that everything starts from us. So we are responsible, we can make the difference. By putting our PPE in the right disposal container, we're helping. We're helping the management of waste in the long term. We're helping also to ensure that our health is kept, and therefore we're protecting the environment. Right now, we're all using all sorts of chemicals to clean up and disinfect. We need to take a step back and think, well, what is it that we're doing? How are we using those chemicals to clean and disinfect, just to ensure that we keep our health? But isn't there another way of dealing with it? Because we're creating another problem. So the challenge is, how do we take the step back to look at what we're doing and perhaps redirect the course with what we already have in place? Gaps, there are many gaps that we still need to address. But I think that if we look back at, we've all been talking about the capacities that the governments have. Sure, the capacities weren't there for dealing with waste to start with. And with COVID, the issue has become even bigger, and it's a bigger problem. But if we take a step back and we start sorting our own waste from our household, then we can make a difference. And just to go back to the issue, it's communication. I think to me, one of the biggest challenges that we have right now, and the biggest gap, again, because there is a lot of miscommunication too, and misinformation, is how do we ensure the right communication and the simple message gets down and across so that everyone can make a difference.
Thank you. And you know, when it comes to communication also, I think one area for improvement is as someone who has interacted with intergovernmental agencies during my political life. I was the vice president of the UN Environment Assembly Bureau. I think I've seen this from within also like the government of Iran when I worked for them, that there is a big also gap between intergovernmental agencies and governments and what is happening in academia. Currently, a lot is it's an exciting time for the academia, and a lot of things are being done, a lot of research is being done when it comes to the issues of waste, pollution, and so on. And unfortunately, there is a gap. Some of us in academia are solving the wrong problem and arbitrary problems that they might not exist. And some of us are producing useful stuff that will never get read or have any impact. The other thing is when we develop these messages and instructions, are we paying attention to the differences between nations and countries or not? Because they're very, very different in their conditions and how they must be dealing with problems. So when we produce messages, we have to consider those caveats as well. Let's go to Swati.
Yeah. Thank you. I think adding on to the previous question, I feel the challenges and gaps, they can be identified into 4 parts. First is at policy level, wherein I feel we need to have more robust circular policies and strategies in place that also have a ground connect. Many a times, policies that are framed or guidelines that are framed, they don't work on the ground because they're far away from ground realities, and hence their compliance, enforcement, and implementation becomes a challenge. And especially in India, with respect to many policies on waste, either they look at 100% compliance, which is not possible given the barriers that we have. So of course, having more robust and more effective policies that have a ground connect is a need of the hour. Secondary, at the implementation level, we need both the administrative and the political will to engage various stakeholders and implement actions on the ground. And this has been said before too, that it's very, very important in today's time to reinvent and design, look at zero waste concepts with minimum dependence on landfills, and with the increasing use of plastics and PPEs and sanitizers and whatnot, look at more effective, affordable, and sustainable solutions. So also addressing the barriers and myths around that. For instance, the surge in plastics that we are seeing across cities, across the globe, not just in India. And one barrier to it is that there is a myth that, probably single-use products are more safer. So, how do we address them? Thirdly, institutional building and strengthening. Of course, there is a dire need to strengthen capacities of various actors at local level so that they can take more informed decisions that would further, help in sustainable development of cities. This is more for the municipalities who are in charge of, managing, who are at the forefront of waste management and sanitation. And last, but the most important is social engineering. And of course, I talked about it, and all of us have been talking about it. It's the biggest challenge. And with waste, we see that, you have both cultural and social barriers that need to be mitigated, that need to be addressed. So how do we mobilize communities, people, residents, so that they are more conscious and informed citizens? So I feel these are the 4 major challenges and gaps that, if addressed, could lead to a lot of improvement on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I encourage the panelists to answer the questions as they're adding up. If possible, we can't have some Q&A at the end, but it would be great if you can answer some of these questions. I also thank the attendees for sending us questions as well as notes and material to be shared with the attendees. Thank you. Let's go to Mushtaq. What are the capacity gaps and challenges in your opinion, Mushtaq?
Okay, thank you. So when we talk about the gaps, the first and I think the most important gap is always in the information, because like the way we perceive the things, we hear the things, or when the science brings the things to us may be quite different. So to fill the gap, for example, for COVID-19 response by the United Nations Environment Programme under the response 1 on the waste, we just produced the 9 fact sheets. Even like to make the aware that medical waste can also come from the municipal waste or households, because PPEs, even the medicines and all these are coming out of the household. So it's not only that medical waste Trump coins, then it says only hospital waste is a medical waste. So these 9 fact sheets we have produced, and then these are being translated into the major languages like Hindi, Chinese, Arabic, French, Portuguese, and so on. So that means the same information from the top national policymaker to the consumer or to the community person has the same across that. And that's supported or based on the scientific information or the research. And that's also brings me to reply to one of the questions from Iran on the wastewater. So one fact sheet is on the wastewater, for example, that yes, when we are washing the hands and all this, though there's not much of the, yet the research suggests that a virus travels from that, but because in many of the wastewater open drains in many developing countries, there are many solids floating there. There are even the animal bodies and so on in the slums you can see. So even if you look on the definition of wastewater for a developed country or for some places is a different definition of understanding of wastewater than understanding if it's a slum in a developing country, the wastewater means. So that fact sheets really brings a lot of information, and that UNEP has produced there. So that's the first gap there. The second major gap, as we always talk about the finance, and though we were talking about that developing countries producing a lot of macro plastics, the challenge is that you look on the GDP versus the waste management ratios. Like Singapore, for example, produces more waste, but because they have a GDP, they invest in the waste, so they have most of the waste treated. Unlike the countries where it's a 300 grams to the 500 grams per capita waste against more than 1 kilogram in the developed countries, but their waste management capacity is very limited because of the finance. And even we say the technologies do not come free. And especially most of the technologies, if they are coming from the developed countries, they cost more when they are reached there, the capacity is required to operate that. That's why when this Addis Ababa Action Agenda was approved to support the SDGs for finance and for the technologies, it is the goal that how we can work together to make the finance available, make the technologies available, including for waste management, because SDGs, all SDGs, again, waste management cuts across, zero hunger. If you look on the 12.3 SDG 12, food loss and food waste, it can support that. So that's another capacity that in many countries, there's no departmental coordination. One department is responsible for SDG 12, then other department is responsible for SDG 2, and there's no relevance. Same goes with the upstream and downstream solutions to see who's responsible for eco-design approvals and who's designing for waste management and waste recycling. You do not see the coordination. That's a like major gap. So again, when we are talking how to fulfill those challenges, the other question came through on the segregation. I know it's the biggest challenge in many countries, how to influence people to behavior for the source segregation. So again, UNEP had quite many good experiences. Suppose in many countries where we do all this waste management strategies, all this, we go with a 2-layer segregation suggestions. One is a hazardous versus non-hazardous. So that's to keep all the non-hazardous waste as non-toxic, non-hazardous, so we can reuse, reutilize that. And within the non-hazardous, wet and dry. So if there's wet and dry get mixed, it's very difficult to recycle and needs a lot of water, energy to clean and so on. So basically just only 2 levels of segregation can help. And again, if you link this with the financing incentives, because whole world works with the economic models. So either you subsidize, you incentive, disincentives. So how you come up with that one, so that is the most key for that one, that how you put that polluter pay principle or extended producer responsibilities together to work. And we are supporting many countries on those things, including on e-waste, medical waste, and so on. The last, but again,
thank you, Mushtaq. You need to conclude.
No problem.
Do you want to add a sentence or two?
Yeah, no, I wanted to say the last challenge or gap is about the political support. Now, waste management is becoming a national agenda, like in India, like Prime Minister is supporting Clean India. So waste management, when it becomes a political agenda, every force is behind that. So that is very important, that how we bring the waste as the political agenda, and UN works for that. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Mario, I can see that your numbers produced a lot of questions. Please take them. And you know, other panelists, you refer to some of the material that your organizations have worked on. If they are online and you think our audience should, you know, they're useful for our audience, please share the links online or send them to Nina, and Nina would share them. And Nina, I can see also that some of the audience, some of the people are sending us reports. If you find them appropriate, please share them publicly. And you know, one thing about wastewater and the problems that we have, we think about the health effects of, you know, virus transmission and so on, but there are other issues. Even in the developed world, in the advanced economies, we have had the issue of wipes, for example, people flushing wipes and wastewater systems shutting down in different parts of the United States. Disinfectants and hand sanitizers, they kill a lot of useful organisms, and they're not properly regulated around the world, and their use has increased significantly. So we have a lot of things happening in different parts of the world, and yet we don't know how to deal with them, and we're not prepared. Ute.
Thank you very much. So, I think I don't want to repeat things again, because I think the previous panelists have just really summarized it very well, that we have challenges and gaps in all areas. You know, and this is, of course, very specific from country to country, depending on the kind of development and level of their financial situation as well. I just would like to provide some data from the Global Baseline 2019 report, which has been issued by WHO and UNICEF on wash activities. It stated that there is no or very limited safe management of healthcare waste in a large proportion of health facilities. It indicates that 40% of healthcare facilities do not segregate waste. In these developed countries, the situation is far worse, with only 27% of countries having basic segregation and safe destruction services. So this is the situation we are talking about in a lot of countries. And a challenge or a gap I'm always seeing is the lack of awareness, because a lot of things can be done in a very easy way to improve situations. And this is just by doing things better, you know, to segregate, to have just to think how to improve the situation without having too much resources. And having the situation and the lack of awareness, maybe I can just give you an example also from Germany. Sometimes when I get visitors from outside, they are very impressed about the segregation in Germany, because when we go into the kitchen, we have like 5 different bins, and it's very complicated to segregate all these different proportions out of the waste. But this is not just something which just evolved suddenly. So suddenly we Germans knew how to do that. Actually, the fact is that there was legal regulation with penalties and fines, and waste management, or the disposal of waste, got really expensive, and there were other ways like recycling, which then minimized the volume of waste, and so also then the cost for the households at the end. So this was like the pressure from the financial situation. But now in these days, when you ask the children, they are really aware of the problems, because they get this information from the beginning on, and in the schools, in the kindergarten. It's always segregation and how to do that, and this is important for the environment, and etc. In this generation, awareness is available. And I think this is the first point of entry to change situations in general. And I think beside all the other things, which are also very, very important, I would like to highlight the point of awareness and capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think UNEP also, had some great initiatives on fighting plastic pollution that must be acknowledged. I think it was pretty successful in raising awareness and creating some momentum, and these things can be capitalized on and reproduced in different areas. And now let's ask María, what are the capacity gaps and challenges in your opinion?
Thank you very much. Before I get into that question, I would like to clarify the figures I cited on microplastic and macroplastic. So those figures, they concern macroplastic that leaks into the environment, not macroplastic production. So these are two very different things. So in a developing country environment, it's more common that the waste that is generated leaks into the environment. Developed countries produce a lot of waste, a lot more waste than most developing countries on a per capita basis, but they also have better waste management systems. So most of it does not leak into the environment. And part of it is exported to developing countries. But even this part that is exported to developing countries is still small compared to what developing countries produce themselves, especially the larger developing countries that were importing a lot of this plastic waste. And again, I'm referring to plastic waste. There are all different types of waste, like computer waste and all this chemical waste. There are different numbers there. I'm describing specifically plastics. So I hope this addresses some of the questions that we received by our participants. So going back to some of the other challenges that we encounter, I'm trying to think of things that are different from what my colleagues have already mentioned. And I'm thinking of things at the global level. For example, our global capacity multilaterally would benefit, for example, from definitions of what is a recyclable product, or an international definition of what is a biodegradable product. So I think this is a way in which globally or multilaterally, we would advance if we're able to agree on those things, for example. I mentioned earlier how also multilaterally, it would be very important for us to ensure that global trade in plastics is sustainable, that we are not going around the rules. And I think the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions can help a lot here. And there have been amendments recently to address this issue specifically. So let's see how the world is going to react to these new amendments. But from a point of view of avoiding contaminated trade or contaminated plastic trade, these new amendments seem to guarantee that that would be less likely to take place, because the important countries would have the right to deny the entry of contaminated plastics. But let's see how this will be coming up in the next months, how this will affect world trade in plastics and so on. And finally, I also, again, at this global multilateral level of what we could have to improve things, would be to have a more harmonized way of looking at policies, of looking at recycling policies or circular economy policies. There are many actors involved, and increasingly, I mean, originally it was mostly developed countries that were focusing on circular economy. Now more and more countries are interested in a circular approach. So it would be good to have a more harmonized way of looking at that issue. And also to promote substitutes and to have, for example, it was something that was mentioned by Mushtaq, how the WTO in the past has already initiated this negotiations on environmental goods that would benefit from lower tariffs and so on. To have that conversation strengthened in a way to promote substitutes to products that are not so sustainable. So thank you again.
Thank you. The last question from the panelists, please keep your answers shorter because you have already discussed a lot of these. I want to have some time at the end for Q&A. Going forward, what are the possible areas and opportunities for collaboration among agencies, among nations, and also we know that we have different conferences of parties coming up on chemicals, on climate, on biodiversity. How can we take advantage of these COPs to set the agenda and fight the new problems that we have and I think build back better the future? Let's start with María.
Thank you. And I'll start with the last point that you raised, which is the upcoming meetings of the conferences of the parties. And for sure, that is a great opportunity. Next year, in 2021, we will have the meetings of the parties for the Basel, the Rotterdam, and Stockholm conventions in July. And this, due to all of the current changes that have happened with the scheduling of other meetings, it seems that we will have also next year a number of other important meetings, such as the biodiversity COP and the ICCM conference, on International Chemicals Management 5, which are both looking at the beyond 2020 and the post 2020 of what to do. And for us, this is a great opportunity to see and identify the links between chemicals and waste and the biodiversity. It's very important because when you do, when you link that, you realize that we're looking sort of at a bigger picture. Right now, we're carrying out a conversation which only looks at chemicals and wastes, and waste in particular. But when you think about the fact that the chemicals and waste are not something that is totally, it's not an extraterrestrial issue. It's something that is there in our daily lives and that is linked to everything else that we do. So we see that there are a number of opportunities that would allow us to raise awareness and perhaps ensure that some of the obligations of the conventions are better implemented. When it comes to working together within the UN system, we also see quite a number of opportunities, in particular with the UN reform. The need to ensure that we can embed all of these obligations that parties already have in their national development plans. So these are all good opportunities where we are able to take away this very individual and atomic type of decisions that have been taken and put them together in the larger map. So I'll stop here with the opportunities.
Thank you so much, María. Swati.
Right. I think as UN Habitat, of course, we would be taking our work forward for advising municipalities and also looking at a few implementation interventions to strengthen waste management on the ground. But overall, looking at possible areas of collaboration with other UN agencies, I think one definitely is at policy level where we could work together on guiding documents that can be used by countries or further modified as per their ground conditions. For instance, devising circular strategies, looking at a lot of research on plastic. Definitely, adding on waste management and plastics in the times of COVID-19, where we are seeing a surge in plastics and single-use products. How do we, look into alternative product space, product design? How do we address stigmas at the same time, create effective and affordable systems on ground, with focus on effective, affordable waste management by making guiding documents and probably looking into or supporting pilot interventions is something that can be looked into. And I feel domestic hazardous waste is an area which in the developing context and global south, we don't have clear estimations on the generation of this kind of waste. As I think the UNEP Southeast Asia office rightly said, we don't have the numbers, we don't have clear inventorizations on generation of this kind of waste, which also includes biomedical waste from households. So clearly, advancing more studies in this area so that, those documents can be used further on by countries, because that is a gray area presently in the developing context. So of course, more research and collaboration on, in all these areas is the need of the hour. Thank you.
Thanks, Swati. Mushtaq.
Yeah, quickly, a few ideas, though, I mean, those ideas can be basis for other ideas. But first is anyway, the science policy interface, which is not yet there. So involving all the partners, like even Yale University, like what Yale can do towards this science and policy interface. And that's very important. Then comes green or sustainable public procurement, where we are working intensively with countries with public procurement is 30 to 50% of GDP, and that's combined with the eco-labeling, how you can reduce the waste, how can you come with the better waste management practices through the sustainable public procurement and so on. Then the third one is the sustainable lifestyles, which is the key always, that how you really promote the sustainable lifestyles and sustainable consumption and production. And the last but not the least, that UNEP's one response is investing building back better. So SMEs, which is in the life cycle of value chain, whether we downstream, including the recyclers, collectors, or upstream with the producers and so on, how you can really bring those green SMEs upfront through different mechanisms to create the green jobs and so on. So I think there's a lot of one agency, one like cannot do. So there's bigger partnerships required. Over to you.
Thanks, Mushtaq. Ute.
Okay, so yeah, I think I really feel that the UN organizations are collaborating much more in the recent years than before. And I think this will keep going on, and this will also have a very good result in efficiency and sustainability. For example, UNEP has set up a partner network called Be Weekly, where the partner organizations, UN and not UN organizations, are just exchanging information and discussing about activities during COVID-19, and are trying to streamline the provided information so that all are more or less giving the same information and the same practices to others. This call are participating WHO, UNDP, UNEP, WaterAid, Healthcare Without Harm, Global Fund, and Gavi. Maybe some more, which I don't have on my head now. But this is a very good example of collaboration, and I hope that this will going on also after COVID-19 pandemic situation. Because the exchange of information between the organization is very, very valuable, also not only for the organizations themselves, but they can provide this information to the countries, to their local offices, to their country offices, and so on. Another example is that there is a UNDP Jeff funded project, so where WHO is also partnering in Africa. So it's tackling Madagascar, Zambia, Tanzania, and Ghana, and so the different capacities are really prioritized. So, for example, WHO is taking over mainly the policy development and legal framework development in the countries, and UNDP is more focused on the phasing out of mercury and providing non-incineration technologies in these countries. I think these kinds of partnerships are very important and are giving a very good signal for the future. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And María?
Okay, so I would like to take this opportunity to come back to one of the lines of work that I mentioned earlier that UNCTAD focus on, and it's the Ocean Forum, in which many UN agencies cooperate. So this is just a welcome invitation to other institutions that are interested to also join this initiative that focus on the oceans economy, and increasingly is looking at the pollution side of how the oceans economy is affected by plastics and other types of pollution. But I also wanted to take this opportunity to also go back to the other project we have, which is this sustainable manufacturing environmental pollution, in which currently we're in an initial state, we're still working on issuing calls for proposals, but it would be very important once we go on ground to the countries to have the support of other UN agencies at the local levels. I have colleagues here today from the Asian institutions or Asian offices of UN institutions. This particular project is focused on sub-Saharan Africa and 3 South Asian countries, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Pakistan. So it would be particularly interesting to explore connections in that area. So I think, like most of my predecessors, that the UN has become increasingly more coordinator in its effort. And I particularly wanted to thank one EMG initiative of which I was a part recently, which was the consultation on marine litter and microplastics. And for me, it was very important to learn that the EMG was involved in this consultation with all the other parts of the UN family. And I'm looking forward actually to see the final product, to learn more about what we as a collection of so many different agencies are doing in this area. So thank you again.
Thank you for your patience and short answers to my questions. I think now it's the time to entertain some of the questions from the audience. One question that has come up, and I think it's a fair point, that today we mostly talked about solid waste and wastewater and these things. None of us mentioned the issue of air pollution. Has any of have any of you worked, or your agencies have worked on the air pollution and the relations of the air pollution to the current crisis? I see Mushtaq volunteering to answer. Thank you, Mushtaq. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, reading the question, first let me put briefly that waste is a major source of all pollutions, whether it be the water pollution, whether it be water contamination, marine pollution, whether it be even air pollution from open burning and so on. So when we talk about the air pollution, waste also greenhouse gases, so waste comes as one of the major sources for the pollution. That's why this is called waste and pollution. But now coming more specifically on the air pollution, as a United Nations environment is heavily working on that. So we saw the sustainable mobility. And during the lockdowns, we saw that a lot of air pollution, like ambient levels, went down in the cities because of the mobility. So that helps us to understand that how we can change our mobility from private car ownership to the shared mobility, or to the public transport, or the cycling and so on. That's one part. Also, we saw that because of the lockdown, there are a lot of industrial went quiet, and there's a lot of air pollution related with the industrial pollution went down. So again, we have to see that how, when we are building back better, we invest into the green industries or green technologies. Same with the energy sources like renewable energy and so on. So over to you.
Thank you so much. I still encourage the panelists to answer the questions via text if they can. And the attendees, if you have questions, this is the time to ask questions from our esteemed panelists. I want to repeat this question again. Some of you answered it already, but different conferences of the parties are coming up. Do you see opportunities there, serious opportunities for taking action? Are you hopeful that this crisis has given us an opportunity for a change to unite and move our agendas forward? As members of the UN family, do you really think that now you're closer. As the result, we know that the physical connections have been cut, but now we are much more comfortable with communicating virtually. Do you see yourself working closely these days, or has this been a real challenge for you? Volunteers. Okay, Mushtaq, over to you.
Yeah, because also of the UN reforms, like United Nations country teams. So even like UNEP is not a resident agency, but we now we are assigned to the country. Like I am on the Pakistan UNCT, Sri Lanka UNCT. So that's where there's a lot of now debates going on within the country specific, like a socioeconomic recoveries out of COVID. And as we see that political, okay, leadership has their own ways and questions, but then science is backing, and we see a lot of debate. That's the positive sign that there's a debate. And eventually this debate will lead all the political influences and all the community pressures towards some decisions. So that's a good start, that there is a debate, a lot of science is involved now, and there's a UN reform, so it's a country teams. There's no like a UNDP working individually, UNEP working individually, we are working together. So that's a good starting. Thank you.
Thank you. Other volunteers, any other response to this question? Okay, one question, I think this is directed to María. Let me see, by mistake, we passed it. So do the figures cited regarding macro and microplastic sources differentiate between locally produced waste and exported waste for recycling? That is then not appropriately recycled?
Okay, I tried to address this on my last comment. So these figures, they mostly relate to the plastic that is consumed in a specific country and leaks from that same country. A lot of this plastic could be imported as, industrial product, a consumer product. But the main issue is that once it arrives at the developing country, it leaks into the environment. So most of the leakage is of plastic that could be produced domestically or abroad, but plastic is consumed domestically and then it escapes into the environment. Some of it is also plastic that is imported in the form already of plastic waste. Some of it is that. So my answer to the question is I actually would have to go back to the study to see how they measured it, but I think I can make a comparison to some other data that puts me in a direction that I think that the important waste is only a minor fraction of the waste that is actually escaping, because world trade in plastic waste is very, very, very small compared to world trade in plastic. And what by that I say world trade in plastic as an input that some industries import, plastic as packaging for products that many countries or companies import, and plastic as part of products. When we buy a computer, we buy furniture, we buy cars, there's so much plastic in all these products. So the amount of plastic that is traded not as waste, but as other types of plastics is huge compared to the size of plastic waste trade. So this puts me in the direction of thinking that the share of imported plastic waste into the plastic waste that is leaking into the environment is small. But this is an assumption I'm making here. I would have to go back to a study that I cited to see how they're taking those two into account. But I would guess that most of that plastic is plastic that is consumed domestically, not the plastic that is imported as waste already.
Thank you. I want to ask the panelists, to now also talk about the negative side, because we are hearing about all these good initiatives which are happening, and apparently you're working, you have responded quickly to some of the existing challenges. We have much more to deal with than what we have written about and what we discussed today. Now let's be a little negative and talk about challenges, what are the great challenges that you think we would face, we as you know, let's say you would face as agencies, and then governments will be facing? So what are you seriously concerned about going forward? Volunteers. So no one has any concern. María.
Well, I think that one of the concerns that we're starting to face is the fact that many of the decisions are being postponed. And many of our meetings and gatherings are being pushed later and later and later. And that's okay to start with. But in the long run, what's going to happen is that everything is going to have to be dealt with at the same time. And that might actually mean that we will have some capacity issues, not just us in terms of the Secretariat for the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Conventions, but the UN system as a whole, governments as a whole. If we keep on sort of thinking that we can delay certain decisions and actions. So to me, that's one of the challenges and concerns that we have.
Thanks, María. And Mushtaq, you wanted to add?
Yeah, in addition to that, because see, COVID, so whole focus went to the humanitarian. So the challenges in any disasters is that these governments, they try to focus immediately on that what they see is the response, like a health response, for example, or lockdowns, or to the economic support systems. But then in this bigger context, suppose this marine littering from the masks and all the gloves and everything that's forgotten, for example, or not really putting that. And so when we, as a UN, is a sort of a secretariat, it's intergovernmental, so all the decisions are taken by the member states and we try to implement and support that. So in this system, when this that change comes, which is not holistic, and sometimes it's very difficult to negotiate between the governments, between the stakeholders, how to bring this holistic approach. So to avoid also the future disasters, to create the resilience also, like resilient supply chains for even the providing the PPEs or ventilators and so on, because that has the link with the life cycles and so on. So that's my suggestion, that we are much in a bigger challenge in negotiating, in making the understanding the holistic picture. Thank you. You are muted, you are muted.
Yes, thank you. So let me ask you another thing, and I know from some of the questions that are being currently asked and comments I get from social media, a lot of people in different parts of the world see the UN agencies as agencies with the power to interfere and save them because they're going through a lot of challenges. The noise here is crazy. So do you see yourself in that role? So can you explain the role of your agencies in the current crisis? How can you help, and what capacity do you have when it comes to intervention? Can you even intervene, or are you having a role of a coordinator, and how useful and effective your roles currently are, your current roles are, given the fact that the countries are going through so many problems and negotiations are becoming harder and harder, as you just noted? Ute?
Yeah, I think, yeah, the UN organizations can do things. So I can just give an example of the mentioned UNEP Jeff project, where we now have extended the project time to the end of the year, but using now the rest of the money from the project to support the countries on COVID-19 activities, like purchasing of PPE and disinfectant, providing trainings and so on. So these are very short-term things which UN organizations can do with the money which is available. And in general, you're right. I think the main activities at the moment is more on guidance and trying to coordinate the countries to not to overreact and to plan properly, to make an assessment and so on before going into the field and procurement of stuff which is maybe not needed or not properly chosen. For the future, actually, my main concern is that that the financial situation of the countries, because like here in Germany during this time, the richer are getting richer and the poorer are getting poorer, and I think the same will happen in the countries. And there's no money anyway, and when the industry is going down, and this is not very promising for the future, I think. And this needs to be considered from the UN organizations as well, as the UN organization will not finance the whole country. You know, this is not possible. So the guidance and coordination will be definitely the core part, I think.
Thank you. Others on this? Mushtaq?
Yeah, quickly, I think this brought bigger opportunities for UN organizations. As I say, that we streamlined quickly the COVID response, focusing on the waste, nature, and build back better investments, and also the environmental governance. And that's how we repurposed the budgets. And that shows that even within this bureaucratic processes and the work plans, where we have a 2-year work plans and all this, we can still like work together to repurpose the things and support that one. And number two, also to bring the major issues on the table. For example, illegal trade of wildlife. So I entered from the west, from the illegal trade of wildlife. And that also is one of the reasons for all this virus transmission and so on, all the slaughters and so forth. So that this brings a lot of opportunities even to highlight which other way is not taken as a not in sight, not in mind situation. Over to you.
Thank you so much. And you know, one last question, which has a summarizing purpose. You don't have to all answer this, but what did you learn from the discussion today about the activities of other agencies with the representatives and, you know, the panelists that we have today, and how do you think you can work with each other going forward? Was there anything new for you? Mushtaq, and then Swati.
Yeah, quickly, because we are already working, but now I know the faces. So I can go to Mario now immediately and he will recognize me because of this. So this is the advantage of today. Thank you.
That's a great point, that, you know, seeing each other, which is now facilitated by the, you know, in the virtual world, has a huge impact on working with each other. I mean, that's something that is needed, as I think our psychology is that way, that we need to see faces. Swati.
I think, yeah, I was about to say the same thing, that it's good to, you know, have a face to, you know, all the important work that various other agencies are doing. And I would definitely love to reach out and, you know, see if there's any possible way to collaborate or work together or share some cross learnings, which would be very, very pertinent at this hour. Thank you.
Thank you. I can get one more answer on this if there is any volunteer. Maria, please.
Thank you. I think that one of the learning lessons from this session has been the fact that a lot has been going on and is still going on. And it's just been reconfirmed that everyone is working at very different levels, but the importance to sort of identify that we are all working towards the same goal. And to me, that's very, very important. And this session for sure shows that we are all in the same road, and hopefully we'll get to the same destination with positive results.
Thank you for your very encouraging response. It has been a very interesting discussion. I was a little worried about the setup, but you know, I'm happy with our progress. It was the first try, and I think it well, and I'm thankful to UNEMG for organizing this, and I hope to see more of these. As you say, even it helps you within the UN system to see each other's faces and get familiar with the work the wonderful work you're doing, and this helps with further coordination and pooling resources and not reinventing the wheel, as you all mentioned, that you don't want to do the thing, you don't want the nations to make the same mistakes or reinvent the wheel. The same applies to you, that like if someone else is doing it, why not taking advantage of what is happening? We heard about the problems of the impacts of COVID-19 and the ongoing crisis on the environmental sector are significant. The general public might be missing some of these important aspects, like environmental aspects of COVID-19. We have to tell them more about these. Many people talk about PPEs and masks, but a lot of other aspects exist when it comes to pollution and waste, as you all discussed. Despite all the limitations, physical distancing and the whole system going virtual and not a lot of you go into offices, we see that activities are going on. This is a good sign for the people who are watching you, for the governments who are thinking about paying their dues, that a lot of things are happening, and hopefully the public find access to the reports that you're producing, the fact sheets, and the multimedia products that have proven to be very, very effective in informing the public and moving them in certain directions, setting the agenda, setting the starting new conversations. As you all noted, changing behavior matters. Consumerism is the mother of the problems we are seeing in the environmental world, in particular the issues of waste. And if we can change our habits, if we can engineer or come up with social changes, we can certainly affect behavior and the amount of waste that is being produced. This is very, very important, given the fact that governments around the world are having financial issues, financial problems. Their capacity to respond is becoming more and more limited, and the problems are different across the world. So many of, yes, reinventing the wheel must not be done, but even reproducing the wheels in some other countries are not possible given the limitations, culture, and local problems. So that's something to pay attention to. As we go forward, we have more lessons to learn. We can coordinate with each other and do a better job. We talked about the issue of communication and the gaps between society, intergovernmental agencies, governments, and academia. This is a wonderful time to get us all connected because we have the same purpose. Conferences of the parties are coming up, and that is all, those are also opportunities for setting new agendas, because the whole world has the same concern at the moment, and this is, as every crisis comes with opportunities. Hopefully we can take advantage of this bitter crisis for changing the future and building back better. I thank you all. The video of this conversation would be online, would be posted online on the UN EMG website and probably other places, so check out the website. There will be 2 more discussions tomorrow and the day after, and I welcome you to join, and hopefully we can have more, shed more light on the problem and provide more insights. And just the last 3 minutes will be given to Hossein for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Kaveh, and thank you, colleagues in the panel. That has been a very thoughtful and educative exchange that I enjoyed a lot, and I think you have made the concluding points very well, Kaveh, and there is not much for me to add on in terms of the conclusions and what was discussed and what we have learned from it. I would like just to re-emphasize the fact that we really wanted to make sure that we have really taken stock of an immense and huge amount of exchange and work that is being done by various agencies, especially in the UN system on COVID, with the, of course, specific focus and attention to the environmental dimensions. So that's the overall aim, and making sure that we have an ability, hopefully in the future, to manage this information and to make them available to the public and also to the agencies themselves for possible programmatic opportunities and cooperation. So that's really our aim, and we are very much thankful for colleagues who have shared. We know that we cannot guarantee that the future efforts will be all done in an absolute coordinated manner, but we have learned from our Nexus Dialogues in the past that while we respect individual agencies' abilities, capacities, mandates, and expertise to deal with the specific aspects of a problem, we would like at least to make sure that while they will be undertaking their tasks in their own sort of portfolios and areas with their own specialization, they will be doing that in an informed manner of what are the other streams of work. And that is the minimum in ensuring that the future efforts will be sort of informed of each other and coherent and leading to common goals at least. So that's the minimum we have set for ourselves, and we are very much thankful for the audience who have posed this question. We wanted also to bring maybe a correct understanding to the picture, and also for our audience to know what are the capacities, what are the expectations that they could have from the UN system, and what are the expectations that perhaps they shouldn't have at that level, to come perhaps with sort of physical and sort of very operational role to play at the country level, knowing that at the country level, the governments are in the lead themselves, and the UN can provide a catalytic support, either from a normative or an operational or humanitarian perspective. So that's the points we wanted also to clarify and to elaborate. We would like to make sure that colleagues have looked at the concept notes for the dialogue. That will be also the same concept note for tomorrow and the day after tomorrow's dialogues. Please do have a look at the concept note, because it helps us to generate perhaps a set of questions for the future topics, building back better, and the issue of health and building a resilience in our system. So hopefully we'll have the much more engaged, similar to today, discussions also in the next 2 days. We will make these available to you. I think what else I wanted to add in my points here. Yeah, you have referred to the dates for tomorrow, and we are very much thankful to everybody who has been able to come in. So over from my side, Kaveh, thanks to Nina for helping to moderate and to organize this whole setup for her efforts, and a big round of applause to the panelists in a virtual manner.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Hussein. I'm thankful to the UN EMG for this opportunity. Very thankful to the esteemed panelists for their smiles and the energetic responses, and keeping keeping the discussion entertaining. Thank you so much for your time. I encourage you, Hussein and colleagues, to share the documents that we refer to in the discussion, and the documents that have been produced by the different agencies relevant to the discussion today through whatever platform you see appropriate, and this will be good to be done. And last but not least, I'm very, very thankful to the lady behind the scenes from New York, Nina Arden, who made today's session possible, and very thankful to the participants who showed interest and also for asking great questions. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day, night, and evening.
Thank you.